letting people know slavery do exist here in Canada.
That was Mania Jess. She was one of thousands of protesters that marched in cities across Canada on Sunday. They're calling on the government to grant permanent residency status to temporary foreign workers and undocumented migrants living in the country. Earlier this month, you might have heard of a United Nations report that called Canada's temporary foreign worker program a breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery.
Because of the way they are controlled by their employers, the constant surveillance, threat, intimidation, violence, being prohibited from leaving their accommodations, and so on. And that, to me, indicates of slavery itself.
During a 2-week fact-finding mission, a UN official traveled across Canada and spoke to migrant workers, including Jess, who I had a chance to speak to at the Toronto protest.
I basically speak to the UN in person, let them know the story is real. This living condition, housing condition, it's unbearable. I was sick and I requested to go to the hospital and they've denied me all of that access. So I have to run for my life because health comes first for me.
Jess first came to work at a Canadian farm back in 2015. Every year, about 100,000 people from developing countries come here to work. They do demanding jobs that often go unfilled, especially in farming. In the seasonal agricultural worker program, employers provide housing for employees, but Jess and other workers say those accommodations are overcrowded, lack privacy, and are unsanitary. Despite the need for these workers, they're often paid below a minimum or livable wage, and their bosses have the power to have them deported.
Without permanent resident status, there's a fundamental power imbalance between migrants and employers.
The UN report called on the federal government to give all temporary foreign workers a pathway to longer-term or permanent residency. In an email to CBC News, a spokesperson for Immigration Minister Mark Miller wouldn't say if such a permanent pathway would be created. However, a mandate letter from December 2021 by the Prime Minister asked the previous Immigration and Citizenship Minister to, quote, explore ways of regularizing status for undocumented workers. And as for the program being likened to slavery, a spokesperson for the minister responsible for the program told CBC News that the government disagrees with parts of the UN report. Specifically, they said the federal government does random inspections to ensure employers are following the rules. But the UN report also raised concerns about that. It said inspections are infrequent and ineffective since they could take place with advanced warning or even over the phone.